Hi everyone. Like she said, I'm Maddie Reinlein. I'm the Texas sales consultant for Control Bionics. So a little bit of my background, I am a speech language pathologist. I currently live in Austin and I got my master's at North Texas. I've worked primarily with adults in skilled nursing facilities and outpatient rehab, but I've also worked with some peds. And now I'll give you a little background about the company. So the Neuronode EMG technology was originally used with servicemen with spinal cord injury. It eventually turned into a communication method for this population. So our founders realized that there was this need for effective communication for people with significant motor limitations. So our Neuronode started to evolve, and there have been a few different versions. We're now an industry leader in EMG access and communication devices. We have headquarters in Ohio and Australia. So that's where both of our founders are from, very different places. And then all of our sales consultants are SLPs like myself or assistive technology professionals. So today you guys will be seeing a demonstration of our newest device, the Neuronode Trilogy. The most unique part about the Trilogy is the fact that it is a 3-in-1 solution. By this we mean there are 3 access methods. So the access methods are traditional eye gaze, scanning, and the combination of eye gaze with our Neuronode technology, which we will talk about in greater detail later. When you have this combination of methods, it's going to lead to faster and more efficient communication and reduced user fatigue. And it's nice to have these flexible access options because it really accommodates user-specific needs throughout the course of their condition. So some features of the Trilogy, here it is right here. It's a Windows Surface Pro tablet. At the bottom, you'll see the eye gaze camera, and it's the newest eye gaze technology that exists. On the screen is our Grid 3 communication software, which we will test out later. And a lot of people ask me, how heavy is it? It's pretty lightweight. I'm not the strongest person, and it's very lightweight for me, so. All right, what can you do with the Neuronode Trilogy? Obviously, communication's the biggest thing you can do with it. You can also send and receive text and emails, surf the internet, listen to music, radio podcasts, read the news. If you've got smart home technology, you can also connect your device to that technology. So if you want to have your device turn on the lights for you, you can do that. So now we'll talk more about the actual Neuronode, which I will show you guys. I will say for anyone who's not as familiar with speech devices, so eye gaze, when you use eye gaze, think of like a computer. You use a mouse to kind of hover over what you want to use. That's where you would use the eye gaze. The Neuronode is kind of like your click. So it's your switch or it's your selection method. So just keep that in mind while we're talking about it today. It has a 24-hour active battery life. It's pretty small and compact, you'll see that. There are 2 modes that we will talk about, spatial mode and EMG mode. It's very durable. It is compatible with iOS and Windows, and it only takes like less than 2 hours to charge. You can charge it in like 20 minutes if you need it quickly. Who can use it? Basically just anyone who's unhappy with their current solution, whether it's low tech, it's fatiguing, you feel limited. Most of our users have conditions like ALS, SMA, cerebral palsy, and traumatic brain injury. So here is the kit that you would receive. Sorry. So I'll go ahead and pull everything up. So you would get the Neuronode. The controller application is something that will pop up on the device when you're setting up the Neuronode, and we'll go into greater detail with that. You get a kit of electrodes, and we'll talk about those. A neuroband, which connects the Neuronode to whichever body part you're using. A lead wire adapter base, so this is used for those that are going to use a facial placement, and I actually have a video of facial placement, but instead of putting the big Neuronode on your face, you would have 3 different electrodes that are a lot smaller, so easier for those little facial muscles. And then at the bottom is our charger kit. Okay, so we'll start with EMG mode. So electromyography is what EMG stands for, and it's the measurement of electrical activity associated within a muscle group. So it is basically those impulses from the brain that are sent to your muscles. It's detected by our non-invasive electrodes on the skin. The signal is displayed in our graph on the controller application. And we'll talk more about this graph, but basically the whole point of it is you can modify the thresholds, so you can change the sensitivity. So some people may be sending stronger muscle impulses than others, so you can change that sensitivity to higher or lower. Okay, I'll stop here. I've seen some questions pop up, Catherine, if
I'm not seeing any questions. Are there any questions?
sorry. It keeps popping up at me, so maybe
I
I'm
think
wrong.
it's just people joining.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought there were all
That's
these
all right.
questions. I was like, I better
Don't worry about it. No, you're fine. Does anyone have any questions at this point, though? If you do have any questions, you can just type them here. All right, I'm not seeing anything so far, so keep on going. And what are the dimensions?
The dimensions, I'd have to look it up to tell you the exact ones. I haven't had that question before. You could probably Google, I can look it up for you, a Surface Pro dimensions.
Okay. I think that gives them kind of an idea of how big it is.
Yes,
Size
sorry.
of a Surface Pro.
It's the size of a Surface Pro, and there is a case around it, but I would say the case is about 2 inches wide. That goes around the Surface Pro. So
great.
I'll get those dimensions for you guys later. Good question. Okay, so for our EMG placement, I've got some pictures of just some typical placement methods. Okay, so the one I'm showing you guys today, I'm going to be flexing my ring finger. So when I flex my ring finger, it actually moves a muscle in my arm. So I have it on kind of close to my wrist, but you'll see that in the demonstration. So interface options, these are all our different types of electrodes. Our most commonly used one is this non-adhesive band. We've got a smaller band if you want to use your arm. We've got people that use their leg. There's a million different placement points, and we'll talk about that. But the band, basically, it just attaches the neuronode to that part of your body. We also have adhesive electrodes. So it's really up to the user. If you are using facial placement, like I talked about earlier, you're going to want to use those smaller electrodes instead of the neuronode. So you would use adhesive in that case. And then some people, their skin, for some reason or the other, may just have, a higher impedance, and that signal is not being picked up as well. And the adhesive electrodes, generally, they're going to get a better signal. But for me, I've never had a problem with the non-adhesive. So it's really up to the user. So now I'll kind of dive into our controller app. The whole point of this app is just to give you some biofeedback so you can see, that movement occurring, what's going to be your switch. I will say that some people's eyes glaze over when we talk about the graphs. The only time you would use this is when you're first setting up that switch, when you first set up your device, and you would have someone like me assisting you with it. So it's not something you'd be using every single day. It's just to see that first initial setup. So when we create a switch in EMG mode, we're going to use the controller application, like I just talked about. And I will have a picture of the graph on the next slide, but on the graph, you're going to see a green line and a yellow line. So that green line is your signal on. That's the level of activity the signal must cross this green line. So in order for it to count as a switch or your selection, it has to go over that green line. And for you to be allowed to do another switch, it has to go under the yellow line. The yellow line is your signal offline. So the reason we have that yellow line is it keeps any activations from happening if you've got high tone or fasciculations. So if that muscle's still moving, but you're not intending to use it as a switch, until you get back to that resting level, it's not going to count as another switch. So you won't be selecting, a bunch of things at once. So to make more sense of it, here's our graph. So that green line is the point of switch. So like I said, the EMG activity, which is in the blue, has to go above that green line and back down under the yellow. So we've got 3 total switches shown here. So every time you've got that peak above the green, back below the yellow, you've got a switch. Dynamic scaling is a really cool feature that they've added where that green and yellow line will automatically adjust based on user performance. So those thresholds are like your sensitivity, right? So you want the green line, it's set up in microvolts, which may mean something to you. It doesn't mean much to me. I just go by the green and yellow line, but you set it to a certain number for you. So let's say when I make a switch, it usually goes up to 5 microvolts. So I'm going to make my green one at 5. I can make my resting one at 0. So throughout the day, if you get tired or if you fatigue, the dynamic scaling is going to automatically adjust those lines for you. So I'll show you in a picture. You can kind of see in this one that those lines are sloping downward. So maybe that's later in the day, they're not giving out as much activity, your muscle signals aren't as strong because you're tired. Well, the neuronode is going to automatically adjust to pick up those lower signals. So that way you don't have to worry about giving more effort when you're exhausted at the end of the day. All right, so spatial mode is our other mode on the neuronode. And spatial mode has absolutely nothing to do with EMG. So basically all those electrical signals we just talked about, throw them out the window. For spatial mode, the neuronode's placed on about any body part that registers voluntary movement, and it's placed at the point of maximal deflection. So basically that means if you were using it on your finger, you would put the neuronode at your fingertip, because that is the part that is moving the most in space versus the bottom of your finger. So point of maximal deflection. So during spatial mode, the movement is captured by sensors in the neuronode. The graph looks just like the EMG graph that we talked about, but it's measured in units of gravity versus microvolts. So when we create a switch in spatial mode, think about movement is 3-dimensional. So in our spatial mode, it's going to be measuring your up and down movement, side to side movement, and forward and back movement. So those are all the types of movement that neuronode is going to pick up. So when you have these settings, you can either have all of the movements showing on the graph, or you can hide some of them, and I'll explain this more. So the graph, like I said, looks like your EMG graph. And keep in mind with spatial mode, I know I've talked about voluntary movement, but this should be minimal effort. I'll show you a video of someone using spatial mode. It's not a lot of movements needed for the neuronode to pick it up. So these are those spatial settings I was talking about. And basically those coordinates where it says spatial graphing, keep in mind, like I said before, you will only use this when you set up your switch the first time you're using it, and then you can save all of these settings. But
Maddie, real quick, there's a couple questions. Will this work on a generic Windows laptop? Will it work from any laptop? Or does it need to be from a tablet device?
We only sell the Neuronode with our Trilogy device. Okay. Or we also have an iOS iPad that we sell it with, but the iPad does not have eye gaze. So okay. Traditionally, more of the iPad users are school users, just because it's compatible with a lot of their apps. But yeah, we don't sell just the Neuronode Access by itself.
Okay, and then a very specific one, will it work with a Tobii PCI?
Like I said, you have to use our device with it. The only reason that is because customer service wise, if we have a bunch of people sending in personal devices that we didn't set up, there could be other issues with the device that we don't know where those originate from. So that's why we only currently sell it with our device.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So when we're setting up our spatial switch, we've got the spatial graphing, and that is where we are just showing those different coordinates. And that X, Y, and Z is what I was talking about earlier. X is that up and down movement, Y, side to side movement, Z, forward and back movement. So spatial graphing part is just showing them on the graph. If you've got these selected, they're going to show up. The coordinate scaling is actually telling the neuronode to measure that. So we've got the X in red, so we're telling it we want you to measure that side to side, up and down, forward and back movement. So the point of all of this is we want the neuronode to eventually only pick up the movement we are doing. So let's say we're doing a toe tap as our switch. We don't want the neuronode to measure side to side movement and forward and back when we're just going up and down. So we want to filter out those other movements. So right now on our graph, we've got all of the movements showing, right? So I'm going to see, it'll let me zoom in. There we go. So these are all three of those movements we've been talking about. But during a toe tap, you're mostly just going up and down. So that X is our up and down line. And you can kind of see, I know it's hard because it blends in with the purple, but the X definitely has the most variability on that graph, the most movement. So we are choosing that X axis as our chosen movement, like I said, the up and down. So in our next slide, we're going to filter out, we don't want it to measure any other movement except that up and down movement. And this is what we have. So it looks just like our EMG graph. We've got the green and yellow lines. That blue line is just your general movement. It's the same thing as the, obviously we've got the red X. They're both measuring the movement. The red just means that it's that up and down movement. But the idea behind all of this, like I said, is just to make sure that you're filtering out any unwanted activity and the neuronode is just focusing on the movement that you want it to focus on. I keep hitting that. So when would you use EMG mode versus spatial? EMG mode is great when our users present with minimal movement, if they fatigue easily, if they've only got facial movement, or if they can consistently activate a single muscle. Spatial mode is great if you've got a variable EMG signal. Tactile defensiveness, so some people for one reason or the other, they just have higher skin impedance. So for some reason, their skin is just really good at keeping the neuronode from detecting electrical impulses. Someone who has a lot of fasciculations or tremors, or if they've got good head control, they're a good candidate for spatial mode. Some placement options for both modes. So EMG placement, finger flexion is what I'll be showing you guys today. Finger extension, which is just extending versus flexion. Bicep movement, tricep movement, calf, shoulder elevation. These are just some options. We've had tongue EMG placement actually is a new one I hadn't heard of. So we find new placement options every day. Some spatial ones are your foot or toe, knee, ankle, arm, fingers, or head, like you wear it around your head like a headband, and you can either move your head to the side, forward and back, that kind of thing. Okay, so I've got a video, or two videos for us. In this first video, I'm using EMG placement, and I'm using it on my face. I actually made this for a client of mine. The only facial movement she had left was smiling. So I'm using smiling as a switch here. And those electrodes on my face are actually connected to the neuronode. I know it's hard to see, but it's on a lapel on my shirt. So that's how it works with that facial placement.
Hi. How are you doing? What have you been up to? Good to see you. When will I see you again? Goodbye.
Okay, so that was our EMG placement. And then on this video on the right, this is spatial placement. This is my coworker. So she's doing a toe tap. She doesn't have her communication software open, so you're just going to hear a beep, but the beep is representative of that signal, so the switch that she's using. And you can tell she's really not moving her foot very much to still get a great signal that you can see on the screen. Sorry. Okay. The last thing we'll talk about is the Grid 3 communication software. So I will show you guys this today, but it's very similar to other speech devices. You've got symbol-based grids as well as text-based grids. There are online grids as well that you can download, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, if you wanted to look up maybe typical like phone conversations, maybe like a telemarketer, you could look up a board that has, you know, stop calling me, that kind of thing, already preset, and you can download it onto your device. We've also got these computer control and environmental control. So basically the computer control is just you're using that eye gaze and Neuronode to use the rest of your Surface Pro besides the communication software. You know, you're able to use the eye gaze to access the internet, your email, all that sort of things, all that sort of stuff. And then environmental control is what I was talking about earlier. If you're interested in that smart home technology, you've already got maybe your lights set up to a smart device, you can also connect it to this device. As far as funding goes, we do have Medicare funding in all 50 states. It says Medicare coverage state by state basis. We do have Medicaid coverage in Texas. Private insurance is usually a case-by-case thing, but we've worked with several private insurances. It just depends. If you've had a device before, there's some stipulations with how often you can get another device funded. And then there's just a one-time funding application. And what's included, you get a 12-month supply of those electrodes that we talked about, 12-month 24/7 telepresence support. So this is a pretty big deal. Since we are a smaller company, we're able to be there for you 24/7. You know, other companies usually have tech support hours, but during that first year, you've got us 24/7. Every device has Zoom already installed on it, and you can just Zoom our tech support, and they'll help you. They can also go remote and basically control your device and fix whatever you need for you. So you can just sit back and watch. We also offer a 2-year warranty. And that's all of my slides. So I'm going to start my demo. But
Maddie, we have a couple of questions. Yeah. Does this support voice banking of my voice?
Yes, we do have voice banking.
Great. And can it control a power chair?
I believe so. I'll have to get back. The only reason I'm unsure is because I haven't had any of my patients ask that, but I know that our original device before the communication device was to control power chairs. You can control external devices. So actually, whenever I get these questions, Catherine,
Yeah,
I can just write down whoever asked them, and I'll be able to email you specific answers.
absolutely.
Right now.
Sure. Another question here, does it specifically support the a cappella speech voice recordings?
That's another one I'll have to ask.
Okay.
We have our own voice banking. It's with Grid 3. I haven't heard of a cappella being used on it, but like I said, they're always adding new applications that can be used with our device. So I will check on that too.
Okay, absolutely. And if there's any questions in here that we're not able to answer at this time, like Maddie said, I'll make sure she gets the full list, and we'll send out the answers to you afterwards.
Yes.
Another question, and this might depend on insurance, but how much is it?
So it does depend with insurance, if insurance covers it or not. So usually with a private insurance, you're going to have a copay, and that all depends on your insurance. If you were private paying, it is about $16,000, which is pretty comparable to other eye gaze devices if you've looked into private pay for them. But for ALS specifically, we work with Team Gleason a lot. I don't know if y'all are familiar, but Team Gleason, if you've got private insurance and they won't cover all of it, Team Gleason will help to cover that. So they will take care of your copay. Yeah, so. All
right, that's it on the questions. And I just had another question on, yes, we will send the answers out to everyone.
Sorry about that, guys. You guys just gave me good questions.
Does STAP, S-T-A-P, cover it?
I'm actually working with someone with STAP right now.
Okay, great. And how much does Medicare cover? And what would be the copay on Medicare?
Medicare covers all of it.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
What is distribution, direct or through dealers?
It's direct through me. I guess I'm considered a dealer, but we only have reps. Like I'm the only rep in Texas, but what we would do right now, since everything's kind of crazy with COVID, we are doing Zoom demos like what I'm doing today with you. And then if you're interested in a device, we will actually send you one to use for an assessment. So we send it for free. You'll get it, and then we will do a remote Zoom again, like what I'm doing, and we'll just kind of help you set it up and see how it works, try a few things, and then you would decide whether you want to purchase one, and then it would be shipped to you. So normally there'd be more like in-person setup and meeting. It's just we're a little limited with what we can do right now. So
Right. Okay. Can you summarize again how eye gaze coordinates with Neuronode? In other words, how does eye gaze work with this?
right. So you'll actually see in the demo too, that may help you understand it a little bit better. But so the eye gaze, I like to compare it to a computer. So think of eye gaze as you're using it to like hover over whatever you want. You're moving that mouse with your eye gaze. And then when you use your Neuronode, your movement, so the movement I'm going to use today is moving my finger, it'll select whatever button you're hovered over. So it's just like using any sort of switch, it's selecting something for you. So instead of traditional eye gaze where you'd have to dwell or blink to select something, you're just making a small movement. So it tends to be a little faster and easier. I personally have trouble with traditional eye gaze. When I'm dwelling on something, I tend to pick like 5 different buttons. So it's easier for me to use the movement. And we found that with our users as well. It's just less fatiguing.
A couple more questions. Do you need an SLP evaluation for funding?
For insurance funding, yes. If you were doing
Okay.
private pay, no, but yes.
All right. And when was it rolled out to market, and how many in the market?
For the how many in the market, I'll have to get back to you on that one as well. But I know that this version of the Trilogy, it did come out in 2018. So I should say this version of the Neuronode. So we did have the Neuronode out with our iPad. It's been out for 4 years, but the Trilogy came out in 2018.
Any other questions? I know Maddie's got a demo for us as well, I believe. All right. Okay, is it probably better to drag items if you're moving them?
You're saying drag with eye gaze, I guess?
We had just someone say it is probably better to drag items. I'm guessing with eye gaze, yes.
Okay. Yes, I guess you mean like computer control. You can drag. I'll show you the eye gaze setup. Maybe that may help.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will say I'm not going to show you guys the calibration part just because it'd be very boring for you to watch. But I have already calibrated this for my eye gaze, so whenever you get your device, you'll have that set up. But for demo purposes, it's already calibrated.
Okay. Yeah, he said click and hold.
Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go to my Neuronode app, and my arm's been moving around, so this looks crazy right now. So I'm waiting for it to go below that yellow. And it's a little jumpy. Give me 1 second. So what I'm doing right now is what I talked about earlier, where you can adjust those settings. So I'm gonna make that even lower. Actually, I'll make it higher. So I'm just adjusting the sensitivity. I guess I had too much coffee this morning and I'm a little jumpy, is what I'm assuming here. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so now I'm below that line. And there's my switch. And I'll show you guys. So whenever I move my arm, I'm trying to move it slow here so it doesn't send it off. So if you can see, I'm just moving that finger. and that's my switch. Okay, so I'm gonna get off that. And now I'm gonna go, so right now I don't have any computer control set up, so that's why I'm using my fingers, just FYI. I'm gonna go to grid 3. And when you open grid 3, you'll have 3 options. So we've got eye control, which is that traditional eye gaze. So if you only want to use eye gaze, that's an option. We've got Neuronode 3.0, which that is when you're using scanning with the Neuronode. So I don't know how familiar everyone is with scanning. We can take questions on that if we need to, but basically the cells will automatically highlight for you, and you will just pick with your Neuronode which button you want to use. And as far as scanning goes, you don't have to use any sort of eye gaze with this. So if eye gaze is difficult for you, or just, you can't use eye gaze, then the scanning with the Neuronode is also an option. But today we're going to use Trilogy. So the Trilogy is that eye gaze and Neuronode combination. So right now I've got my eye gaze on. So we've got our backup. So if you're using this, this is a good lesson. You set it up with your eye gaze, right? So you don't want to move like me, who was moved throughout this presentation. But anyway, this is one of our symbol-based grids. So if you wanted to use a grid with preset symbols, that's our option. Or if we wanted to use something with text-based, we could go to AlphaCore. So I've got this already
Hello, ALS Texas.
preset. So in AlphaCore, obviously you're getting that text-based keyboard. So you can type out things if you would like, or you guys can see some of the ones I've used recently. These are some preset buttons that are already in there. You can also go to topics, and we've got all sorts of presets in there. Keep in mind, all of these grids, you can change them however you want. You can put the buttons wherever you want. You can add new boards. Typical things you would do with any other communication device. It's all customizable. Okay, so I'll just type out, let's see.
How are you doing?
So it does have that predictive feature too, where if I just start typing, it'll give me some options at the top. But as far as the eye gaze and selection method goes, I hope everyone could see, I don't have my video on me, but I hope everyone could see my hand moving for the selection. Can y'all see it? Okay. So I'm using, again, my hand right now. If I had computer control on, I would be able to go back to the Grid Explorer, but just for demonstration's sake, I'm not using that. If I want to go back through here, we've also got tons of accessible apps. So you can get on all your social media, internet options. You can connect your phone and email all through here. I know it's jumping around. Those are just my eyes moving around. And then as far as computer control, this is where you would turn it on. I'm not going to turn it on right now just because, unless anyone really wants to see it. Basically, I'll do it here. If I do computer control, so here you've got all of your options. So left click, double click, right keyboard. And then I've got my eyes as my cursor there. And I'm blinking, so that's why it's doing that. So that is computer control. And that's if you want to use Zoom or any of these features you would use on a computer normally outside of the communication software. All right, so that is all I have for my demo. I can demo more stuff if we have questions about it, but I will open it up to questions now.
We've got a couple of questions. Is this available outside of the US? Someone specifically asked if it could be shipped to Colombia.
So not at the moment. I actually have a user in Mexico, and they have a family member they're shipping it to in the US, and that family member is going to bring it to them. So that's typically what's done. I know we do ship to Canada, but Colombia is not where we ship right now.
Okay. I have one question from someone. It says, I am not yet disabled enough to qualify for this, but would it be a good time for me to voice bank before my speech is affected? And is it possible to set up the voice banking in advance of buying a unit?
That's a great question. I think there is online access. That's going to be one question I get back to. Oh, sorry, your screen sharing.
Okay.
So these apps do have online access. So let me look into that because that's a great idea. That'd be smart. I'm sure you can. I will look into it and get you a for sure answer though.
Okay, great. There we go. That's better. See, any other questions? If you have any other questions, you can type them in the chat box. And
I
I'll
will
look back
show you
and
guys.
make sure.
Here's it up close since I've been wearing it the whole time, but you can kind of see it. It's blinking, and then these are those electrodes on the back. So this is our small band I'm using.
Great. Do you have a video of an actual user online that we could see?
Yes, if you go to youtube.com/controlbionics, we have some user videos on there. I believe we also have some on Facebook, and it's just facebook.com/controlbionics.
Okay, I'm going to send everyone this YouTube link. And we'll get everyone Maddie's contact information afterwards as well.
Oh, thank you. Someone put in the Service Pro dimensions.
Yeah, Katie on our team put that in there.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to add that to my presentation. That was a good question.
If you have a recording of your voice, can you use that to bank?
Yes.
Let's see. How often do ALS patients need to reset the switch? Is it like calibration on the Tobii?
You shouldn't have to reset it very often. The only reason, typically with our ALS users, maybe they'll start out with a certain switch and for some reason or the other, they're losing movement and that original switch. So if you're going to change to a different movement, you're going to need to set up a new switch. But I would say you can save those settings, so you shouldn't be having to calibrate. Generally, whenever you're turning on your device, let's say you haven't been wearing your Neuronode, it's in a standby mode, so you just shake it to wake it up. We call it shake to wake, and then it'll connect automatically to your Bluetooth, and it should have all your settings saved. So not often.
Makes sense. All right. Do we have any other questions? Does voice banking only do the words you have banked, or does it generate other words from that recording?
I believe it only uses the words you have banked.
All right, I think that's it on our questions then. I'm going to go ahead and share this screen. Oh, does it disable the keyboard?
Can you disable it? Yes. If you wanted to.
And then I have another comment. Thank you. This technology is amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate everyone listening to me talk for almost an hour.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for this presentation. Thank you so much, Maddie, for giving us an overview of Control Bionics speech generating device. We will be sending a recording out of this. Looks like we have one more question. Let me just check this real quick. Oh, good. This is amazing and helpful. Good to hear. We will be sending out a recording afterwards, and I'm going to be taking down all of your questions as well that we weren't able to answer during this time. I'll send them over to Maddie, and then we'll get all those answers for you. So we'll send over Maddie's contact information, a recording of this to the email that you registered on, and the answers to all of those questions. Be sure to take a look at our upcoming events at alstexas.org. We're actually adding a bunch of new ones in the next couple of days. And our next event is actually our ALS Texas Town Hall. You can find the link to it at alstexas.org/virtual events. And we'll be talking about how we're continuing to serve the ALS community during COVID-19 and having a research update as well. So be sure to join us for that. Thank you again, Maddie. Let me just check to make sure there's no more questions. Screen slides available. Maddie, can we get those screen slides from you?
Yes, I'll send them.
Okay, and Alberto is asking, does it disable the keyboard? I think we haven't quite answered his question.
Okay.
I think he's asking maybe if it disables the keyboard by default.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
I believe you can set it up to either have the keyboard on or off.
Okay. All right, that's good to know.
If I don't answer his question, tell him he can email me too.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Maddie. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next one.